Can you believe it? Just because it wanted to keep a place full of food secret, a tiny bird pushed itself into a horrific death. Not because it was starving, not because it was weak, but because its greed was greater than its fear. In what seemed like a peaceful forest, a flock of birds lived by one single rule. Whoever found food had to call the whole flock to share it. That rule was what kept them all fed and safe. But the day a secret appeared, that unity began to crack. And tragedy quietly opened the door. The flock was large, but never chaotic. Above all, they had a very wise king. He did not rule by punishment, nor did he keep the flock together through fear. He set only one rule, so simple that every bird remembered it. Any bird that found food had to let the whole flock know. Thanks to that rule, every morning was a shared journey, and every evening was a full and satisfying return. No bird was left behind. No bird had to sleep on an empty stomach. In that vast forest, sharing was the invisible nest that kept them all together. Then one morning, everything began to drift away from its familiar path. While the flock was still flying along its usual route, one little bird absent-mindedly flew farther and farther away, as if something were pulling it away from the safety of the flock. It flew past the edge of the forest, beyond the thick canopy, and for the first time saw a wide road stretching outside. Truck after truck loaded with grain rolled toward the market, and behind them, food spilled all across the road. A secret had just revealed itself. If you think this is the turning point of fate, comment 0. The little bird's eyes lit up. In front of it was no longer just a few scattered seeds in the forest, but an entire road covered with food, more than it had ever seen in its life. It swooped down, pecked at one grain, then another, and joy surged through it, as if it had just discovered a hidden treasure. In that first moment, it thought of the flock, thought of the king's rule, thought of how happy everyone would be if they knew about this place. But at that very moment, another thought, darker and slower, began to creep into its heart. At first, that thought was only a passing shadow. But the longer it stared at the endless trail of grain before it, the darker that shadow became. The little bird told itself, if I tell the flock, this place will be crowded in no time. Each bird will only get a little, so how much will be left for me? From one tiny thought, greed began to grow. It slipped quietly into its mind, gently, but with enough force to choke the honesty that had just flickered there a moment before. The bird stood still, looking around the empty road, its heart beating faster. It knew it was standing between two choices: to share as the Bird King had commanded, or to keep the secret and enjoy it all alone. And in the end, it chose wrong. That evening, the little bird flew home later than usual. The whole flock looked at it with concern, and a few hurriedly asked, "What happened?" It needed no more than that. At once it swallowed the truth and covered it with a lie. It said that outside the forest there was a very dangerous road, where huge vehicles sped by so fast that getting too close meant certain death. The flock was terrified when they heard this, and no one dared ask any more questions. And just like that, with a single lie, the little bird locked away the storehouse of food for itself alone. If you think this is the moment greed fully took over, comment 1. From that day on, every morning the little bird left its nest earlier than the others. Quietly, it flew across the forest and straight to that road covered with grain, as if it were guarding a treasure no one else had the right to touch. There were no more calls to its friends. No more scenes of the whole flock gathering to search for food together. There was only the bird, alone among the scattered grain, pecking non-stop, eating non-stop, and feeling happier each day because its plan was working perfectly. At first, it was excitement. Then it became habit. And little by little, that selfishness no longer made it feel guilty. Instead, it made it believe it was clever. Day after day, the little bird not only kept the secret hidden, it also began to look down on the real danger. The scariest thing was no longer the road outside the forest, but the blind confidence growing inside its heart. Because nothing bad had happened yet, it believed it was fast enough, smart enough, lucky enough to avoid any danger. It was no longer cautious as it had been in the beginning, no longer eating while constantly glancing around. It began pecking greedily, lowering its head close to the road, ignoring the sound of vehicles in the distance. Greed, when fed for too long, makes a person believe they are in control of everything, right before they lose it all. And then, that moment finally came. That morning, the little bird once again lowered its head and busied itself picking up grain, pecking one seed after another, as if nothing around it mattered. It ate eagerly, greedily, forgetting even to look up. And at that exact moment, from behind, a truck came rushing forward. The screech of its wheels against the road lasted only a split second. By the time the little bird realized it, it was already too late. It had no time to flap its wings, no time to cry out even once. The wheels had already run over it. Everything ended in a single instant. The little bird died right there by the roadside, with no one knowing, no one coming to save it, and not a single call sounding around it. The place that had once filled it with joy because there was so much food, in the end became the place that buried it. The most painful part was not only the death itself, but that it died in loneliness, separated from its flock by its own greed, cut off from their protection, cut off from the good things that once belonged to it. Just because it wanted to keep a little benefit for itself, it lost everything. And that is the price anyone who lives by lies, selfishness, and greed will sooner or later have to pay. What is gained through dishonesty never lasts.